So like we talked about earlier, rapport is extremely important. We want to use it for the benefit of building up that relationship. Lying is a big no-no. I said that earlier. I am not a fan of lying because to me, lying is about when you lie to somebody and they catch you in that lie, you're going to destroy any type of relationship you built in that person. Now, here it says sometimes other officers' failures can become your rapport. Let me give you an example. You have a friend, the good cop, bad cop mentality. You have a friend who's done the interview before you. They've not gotten anywhere. They're not building a good relationship with the person. You come in the room, kick your friend out, and tell the guy, sorry that you were having to deal with, Officer Smith. He's not really good at these kind of things. He doesn't understand a lot of stuff of what people your age are going through. Because let's say it was a young officer versus now you're talking to a 60-year-old person who's committed a crime. Somebody closer to their age walks in there and says, that young kid, he has no idea what life experience is like. I don't know why they even sent him in here. Listen, I'm going to sit down with you and let's try this again and let's talk because you seem like somebody who's gone through some serious life stuff. So have I. Let's talk about those. I'm sure yours is probably worse than mine, but let's talk about what you're going through. So sometimes throwing a fellow officer under the bus is not a bad thing. It can establish rapport. Just be careful what you say about officers. Don't say things like, he's a terrible interviewer, he's a terrible investigator, he's a horrible person, nobody likes him. You be careful with that stuff because it sounds fun to say about one of your friends sometimes, messing with them and you're not being serious about it. But when you go to trial and that video is played back in court, you do have to think about those consequences during court testimony. So be careful what you say. I've used methods before where I've said I had a friend of mine who was not really liked by a person he was interviewing, and I don't know why, because the person that I'm referring to was a phenomenal officer. He's a phenomenal investigator and probably one of the best that I know out there. But for some reason, him and the interviewee just could not get along. And so they got done with their interview. He came out and was talking to me, and he said, I don't know what this guy's problem is. He just can't stand me. And I said, okay, let me see what I can do. So I go in the room, and while I'm sitting there talking to the guy, the first thing I tell him is I shake my hand and I say, hey, I'm such and such. I'm Chris Campbell with the SBI. And I know you already met one of my partners here. Listen, man, don't judge me based on him. I can't stand that guy. A lot of people can't. He's just got a really bad attitude when it comes to this job. Please don't judge me by him. And instantaneously, rapport was built because we both had a common enemy at that point. And, of course, my friend knew that I was just joking. I was not serious about it. But sometimes you have to use those different ways to build rapport with people because sometimes it's hard to build relationships with people in these stressful situations because of the stress that they're being put in. And so you got to think about that. So we're helping establish that baseline through rapport. So we've talked about body language earlier in this class, and that is something that's important because establishing that baseline for an individual, understanding what their base level is important to us. And this is how we establish that baseline through rapport building. We see people open up in conversation when they're not talking about the serious thing. When they get to just talk about themselves a little bit and they're not really focused on the serious issue at hand, they can be more open about themselves and not have that fear that's associated with it. We call it cognitive strain. When somebody is really stressed out and they're not willing to give a lot of information because they're shutting their brain off the best they can. And then whenever somebody's calm, we call that cognitive ease from a psychological standpoint because they feel easy and it's easy information they can give out without feeling threatened. And so the brain focuses back and forth on those two categories. And in rapport, that cognitive ease, that basic feeling of letting stuff out is you have the ability to do that. It makes it a lot easier for people to open up to you. When you start asking those hard questions, then things backpedal and we end up being in a rough situation when we're trying to ask those hard questions. So that one-on-one, again, we talked about this earlier in another class, is we want that one-on-one confrontation if we're doing true interrogation type stuff. Again, with the suspect interview, there's a possibility of having two people. But y'all, when it comes down to it, we want one person in there so that they can focus on one person. If you don't feel comfortable with that for whatever reason, that's something you and somebody else has to work out. But as an interrogator, somebody who's been doing this a long time, it's more distracting for me to have somebody else in there for me I get distracted by the other person because they interfere with my repetition on my mindset of where I think I'm supposed to be, and it's not their fault. Sometimes they just do it and they don't mean to do it, but they kind of get into this rhythm where I'm asking so many questions and I feel like I'm in the right rhythm and then somebody else jumps in and takes over. So one-on-one is always the better approach in my opinion. And like I told you, we don't lie on rapport. We got to help keep that confidence in them trusting what you tell them. So here it says you want to attempt to be 7 to 5 feet away from the subject whenever it comes to this part. That's hard for some people. It's very hard for some people to be in that distance, 5 to 7 feet. Some people want to be in that the whole time. But as we go through this, you're going to see as we get into the confrontational phase, we're going to have to get closer to people because confessions are not made from 7 feet away. Confessions are made from 4 inches to 5 inches to 6 to a foot away. There is not a big gap when it comes to actually getting people to confess to us. All right, so during that information gathering phase, remember we talked about rapport, now we're in information gathering phase. We allow the individual to tell their side of the story regardless of the lies, kind of like we've talked about already. Using recording systems are going to help us because if they say they didn't say something, of course the recording system, we can play it back for them and say, actually you did, and here's when you said it. You can also have other officers watching from another room, so there's nothing wrong with having 2 officers engaged in the interview. One can be outside of the room and one can be inside because they can see things from the outside that you can't. You're focused on the interview, and it takes a long time in this line of work to feel confident in seeing the deceptive signs that an investigator is going to see from face value when you're sitting in the room with somebody. But having somebody in oversight outside of the room watching may actually help you see a lot more of that stuff because they can relay the stuff that they saw on a break and say, hey, when you ask these questions, you could see his body language totally shift away from feeling confident. He got really nervous, scared. He pulled back, his shoulders clenched up, and he started tapping his foot. And you may not have saw that because you were so engaged in the interview. So having that 2-officer approach, one from the outside, one from the inside, is a good idea. Way more, in my opinion, than having 2 people in the room at the same time. So while we haven't really talked about micro expressions, we're going to talk about when it comes to those personal emotions in general. So those micro expressions are the facial expressions that our body gives out a lot, and our own emotions and stuff like that. Same with your body language. Keep your emotions in check. If our emotional intelligence gets the best of us, then that person wins. Like it says here, listen, John, it's not that bad. You only killed 1 person, not 3. As silly as that sounds, that is an approach that we use sometimes to talk to people, and that's, again, a more advanced class that we teach when it comes to these types of deception indicator cues. But you laugh about it. I've used it before, and it's worked. I've told people, hey, man, you only killed 1 person. It's not like you were out here causing a mass casualty event. And that's opened people up because they realize, wow, this person doesn't think I'm a horrible person. When in reality, mindset is they did murder somebody, and it's our job to try to get them to tell us the truth. So use those little simple things like that, but when you do, you've got to make sure you keep your emotions in check. When somebody tells you something disturbing and disgusting, you can't look like you're disgusted in your face. You've got to slow down and be less engaging physically when it comes to that stuff. You've got to sit back and say, wow, that sounds like that was a really bad day for you. I hate that you had to experience that situation where you shot your wife. I can't imagine the emotions that you went through after that. And as crazy as that sounds, that's what they want to hear. They want to know that you can feel them as a human being and understand them deep down inside. All right, so when that confrontation stage happens, we want to maintain that confidence. We want to keep the confidence with us and not let them have a lot of confidence. We don't want to give away information unless you can help it. Y'all steer away from giving out evidence. One thing we do not do is we don't tell them the evidence that we have. The reason for that is sometimes by us giving that evidence, that's all they're looking for. And what they want to know is, what do you know on them? Well, we don't do that. We give them an opportunity to tell us what we already know. And so we don't go in there with the mindset of, hey, I'm going to tell you what I'm going to tell you, play all my cards so you'll play yours. That's not the way this works. We hold all the cards in our hands. They're the ones that have to communicate with us what they know. So during that confrontation stage, like I told you in some other one of the other blocks, we go from that 80-20 phase where they're talking the most to now we're taking over. Now we're breaking down systematically that 20% of their talk, now 80% us, to where we're telling them we're not going to believe your lies anymore. We're not going to let you compound these lies anymore. Now we're going to tell you here's what happened. Here, when it comes down to what the crime is, we know this information. Now again, we're not talking about evidence, but we're talking about saying things like, we know that you did this. I have no doubt in my mind you're the person who did this, and this is why you need to tell me the truth, because it's only going to benefit you to be honest at this point, because all the evidence is covering you up at this point, and you need to get in front of this situation. Don't make those false promises. We don't want to in our credibility, and of course some false promises when it comes to legalities. We can't anyway because that is violating the person's rights, and we do not want to do that. We want to stay in the area where it's safe and tell people if we're going to promise people stuff, let's follow through with it. For instance, hey man, I'm going to go grab you a drink and something to eat. I'll be right back. I can make that promise, right? I can go grab a drink and food and bring it right back, and I can make that promise. So those simple promises like that I can. Or, you know what, man? As far as I'm concerned, I don't see any reason why you're not going to be able to leave here today, because let's say it's a robbery or something. You know what? We're not worried about them stealing money tomorrow. So we tell them, look, no matter what, man, as far as I'm concerned, you're going home today. You're not under arrest anyway, so I'm going to let you go as soon as we get done talking. And I can make that promise to them because I'm not worried about arresting them at that moment. It's going to be a little different when you're working a case like a homicide where, there's a flight risk, a major flight risk there, so we may not be able to do that. And again, falls under your policy and procedure for your agency because they may say, no, once they confess to a crime, they have to be arrested, things like that. That's things you have to follow through. But with me, 9 times out of 10, I don't arrest the person right then. I'm going to come back and get them later. All right, so during that confrontation phase, we're looking at 2 to 1 feet away with those slow movements towards the subject. So I got a video I'll show you here in a little bit. You'll watch, that's outside of the PowerPoint, where you'll see that confrontation phase move closer to the subject. So I'll be sitting farther away and we move closer. It's not a quick, sudden movement where you're right in front of them. It's kind of like you've got these 3 officers standing over top of this guy. We don't do that. We are staying far away from them and we're slowly moving our way up. So remember, we were 7 to 5 feet away earlier. Now we're 1 to 2 feet away. And so we're getting closer and closer. And of course, that 1 foot, we may even move into where we're actually going to become what's called a patter or a hugger. I have hugged, I have patted, I have touched on the shoulder, I have done a little bit of everything when it comes to talking to people. I give them those verbal reassurances, just like your parents did with you when you were a kid. Hey, it's going to be all right. I'm here for you. Don't worry about it. We're going to get through this. Those are real important. Now, one of the questions I have asked me is, what about a female and a male interviewer? Okay, same rules apply. We got to be more careful about that patting and that touching because we don't want to cross any lines. But I have seen female interviewers use the outside of their hand to pat the outside of a male's leg, or same with the shoulder, like a guy pats a female on the shoulder, up on the top shoulder, keeping their hand open palm, so it's not like they're actually clasping their shoulder, and they're just kind of patting them real soft and slowly, but they're keeping that ability to kind of stay, again, like in a dad or a guardian mode versus any type of way it wouldn't be considered something else. That's another great thing about having video recordings, is because whenever the public sees that, they see that it was never meant to be anything more than just a simple pat, a reassurance pat. Guys, if you're interviewing a female, you can use the outside of your hand to pat the outside of their leg. That way that you're not getting up there and making it look inappropriate. But again, it's all about how you feel. If you don't feel confident doing it, that's something you're going to have to battle with. But I can tell you right now, confessions are not won by sitting here looking at somebody from 7 feet away. Confessions are won in the slide I'm getting ready to show you. So right here, folks, this is how confessions are made. This gentleman right here committed a homicide almost 40 years ago on the date of this interview that was conducted. Almost 40 years ago, he murdered somebody on the complete opposite side of the country, and that weight has been on his shoulders for almost 40 years of his life. And during that time, he had to deal with the constant idea that somebody was going to come get him and arrest him. And what got this man to this point was me telling him, man, that's a lot of weight you've put on your shoulders. Let's get that off of you. He was a very religious individual. What you're seeing right here is him praying to God to release a lot of that stress. And in his prayer, he was confessing to the murder of an individual. So sometimes that's what it takes, y'all. Sometimes it takes getting people into their comfort zones like this, where I'm sitting here patting him on the back, telling him it's going to be okay. We're going to get through this together. This is how confessions are won. Now, if you're watching this PowerPoint and you're like, I can't do that, that's something you're going to have to get over. I mean, I hate to be that way, but you can't sit there and assume that you're always going to be able to get confessions from that far away, because you're not. You're going to have to get up close to people to get them to confess. That's just the way it works. Being up close to people, patting them on the back, reassuring them that life is going to be okay, that we're going to get through this together. Again, we're not making false promises that they're going to go home, but we're just letting them know, hey, I'm here for you today. Let's get through this together. Those are the things people are wanting to hear from you. All right, so just remember, not all the time do we get them to completely confess to the crime. Sometimes it's what they don't say that's just as important. So while we're talking to people, they may not confess to it, but they may slip up with some admissions and things like that. They may say things that they didn't mean to say, like they changed their timelines, or they slip up and say a name of somebody was with them when they had told you before that they weren't with anybody. Again, they may slip up and say something like, there's no reason why my fingerprints would be there, when then you find out their fingerprints were there. So those little small things can be. So just because we don't always get confessions right away doesn't mean that we're not making progress. Sometimes we get the information we get, and then we verify that it's true, and then we come back. So like it says here, sometimes people will tell us some very unusual stuff, and we're like, there's no way that's true. And it happens from time to time. We get people that will tell us, man, I'm telling you, I wasn't at the gas station that night because my truck caught on fire. And you're like, come on, man, that's a really bad excuse. Sure enough, you check, an hour later on a police report, there it is, a police report where his car was on the side of the highway completely on fire at that moment, and you're able to verify that information. And so sometimes people say some really unusual stuff. Most people, when it comes to interviewing them and interrogating them, they're going to stick with simple truths. People who give you extremely unusual truths are usually truthful people, because those very unusual things can sometimes be verified, and they know if you can verify the truth, that's going to help them out. And then a guilty person, they're not going to risk throwing something super unusual out there, because when you say, man, I've checked on that, there is no report that says your car was ever on fire, they're going to realize real quick that you caught them lying. So truthful people are a lot of times going to be more open about this unusual stuff that occurs to them. So that's some of the stuff you have to take into account when it comes to interviewing people. Understand that sometimes unusual stuff can be true, and we've got to validate that information. So again, having two interviewers is great, one on the outside, one on the inside. If you tell somebody something, then it might be beneficial for them to go back and check, your partner go back and check on that while you're in the interview talking about it. So if they say their truck caught on fire yesterday, so there's no way they could have robbed that bank, then let them go and check and see if there's a police report on that while you're talking in the interview. So that might help, having those two officers part of that interview, even though they may not be in the room with you. So a couple things that are out of our control that we can't help with. Number one is language barriers. You're going to have people that are going to have these language barriers that we're going to have to work around a lot of times. If you don't have somebody who is bilingual or able to talk to the person, that's something you're going to have to adapt from your agency. You need to get in good contact with your local government programs out there that has the ability to have language barrier gaps that can be fixed through people that actually do speak bilingual, that work for your agencies or work for adjacent agencies that might be able to help you. So you need to figure that one out. Age differences between interviewer and interviewee sometimes is big. You may not want a 65-year-old man interviewing a 16-year-old kid because they don't really have a lot in common. However, what if that 16-year-old kid lives with his grandparents and he has a really good relationship with his grandparents? Then it might be beneficial to have a 65, 70-year-old detective in that room to talk to the person. But if you get a 22-year-old kid, it might be beneficial to have a 22-year-old officer to kind of connect with, because they can understand them a little bit more from that age group. So you need to look at those kind of things. If you have the ability to put them in your control, then it's great. If not, some agencies have one detective, and they're not going to have the ability to reach out to other detectives to come in and help with an interview. Sometimes you can't control that stuff. You've also got male or female interviewee or interviewers. Sometimes having a male or female interviewer in the room is beneficial. Maybe it's not. I have a friend of mine who's a phenomenal female interviewer, and whenever I have a narcissistic male or a male-dominant individual in the room, I love for her to be in the room, because she comes in with this really meek approach. Within 10 minutes, when they think that they can control her, she's flipped the switch on them, and they're breaking apart quickly because they're not used to having somebody dominate them. Because you think of a male dominance figure, somebody who's sexually assaulting children, and they're sexually assaulting little girls. You put a strong female person in that room, they're not going to handle that well, because they're not used to having a woman take control of them, and because they're used to doing it the other way. So sometimes it benefits you to look at what type of person you're going to be interviewing. And that's something we talk about in an advanced class on, here's a good idea of this kind of person for this kind of interview. But look at those kind of things in front of you. And sometimes you got to step away from the situation. As hard as it sounds sometimes, and this is one thing that I have constantly battled with in my career, because I want to be in that interview room. I want to be in there and get that confession. I have made mistakes in interviews before where I've tried to get people to confess and I've pushed too hard. And if I'd have just stepped back and let somebody else step into my shoes, probably would have done a lot better. I had a mentor of mine one time. We were interviewing an individual. They were closer to the same age. I was younger. They were interviewing. My mentor asked me to step out to get something to drink. I should have took that hint because apparently the subject that we were interviewing was starting to focus more on him than he was on me. I could tell that my rapport was not established real well with the individual. And so I stepped out. I went out. I stewed for a few minutes, wanted to get back in there and continue the interview, walked back in. They were talking for a few. I butted in on that conversation, and within 2 minutes, the guy asked for his attorney. And when that was over with, I'll never forget, my mentor looked at me and he said, "Now, what did we learn, Chris?" And I said, "I have learned to keep my mouth shut and stay out of some of these situations." And he laughed and he said, "You know what? So you've learned that lesson now. That's good. Maybe next time it won't happen." And so I've learned that sometimes even me, as much as I enjoy being in that room, it's not going to be beneficial for me to get in there and do that kind of stuff. Sometimes I got to step out. Sometimes you got to step out and let somebody else step into that situation. But again, understand, there's difference in pride and fear. Don't be afraid to get in there in that situation. Pride is the difference. If you're too proud to step out, that's a whole big difference than somebody who's too afraid to step in. If you want to become good at this kind of stuff, you're going to have to get in that interview room. You're going to have to. You're not going to have a choice. So things that we do have control over a lot of times. Number one is our environment. Yes, if you're a patrol officer, you may not have the ability to control the environment that you're pulling somebody over in and trying to get information from, but for the most part, when we do interviews and stuff, a lot of times we can't control the environment that we're in. We bring them to a location to interview them. We put them in a room that doesn't have a lot of stuff on the walls. So things like that we want to steer away from when it comes to those interviews. Also, our dress code. Some agencies have this firm belief in you have to wear a shirt and tie if you're going to be a detective to work every day. I will tell you, I'm a strong believer against that, because if I'm interviewing a 16-year-old kid and I'm wearing a shirt and tie, I am already creating a psychological barrier with that kid, because they're seeing me as this dominating figure who can't meet them in the middle somewhere. Me, I'd rather have a polo on. Y'all, I have gotten confessions and homicides in a pair of shorts, t-shirt, and flip-flops before, because being brought in on a day off and they needed somebody to interview somebody, and I come in and I talk to somebody. Y'all, they want people they can connect with. They want to know that they can talk to somebody who's going to understand them. And you wearing this three-piece, really beautiful suit into that room with somebody who's wearing a Metallica t-shirt is probably not going to build the relationship that you thought. Now, you also got to think of it from a standpoint of some people you probably do need to wear that shirt and tie with. Like if I'm going to interview a doctor, I'm probably going to wear a shirt and a tie because I want to keep that level of respect on both sides and let him know that, hey, I look professional, you're a professional, we're going to maintain that profession. Again, we can control our own emotions. We talked about that earlier, about staying in that emotional intelligent state, not letting ourselves get too worked up over a case. It's hard sometimes on the seriousness of these cases not to want to get caught up in them, but we've got to be careful with that. We can also be careful on the things we say and the emotions that we give. So the words that we use sometimes, we can be careful with that too, based on what we're talking about. When we're talking about certain things, we need to be careful. Like, we don't want to say necessarily say something like, "You raped that little girl," right? We may want to say like, you touched her, didn't you? Simplicity of the wording to make it sound softer. It's still the same exact thing, right? Saying something like, instead of saying you stuck your fingers inside of her, you may want to say things like, "You placed your finger inside of her, didn't you?" And the simplicity of that, as gross as it sounds simpler to the person, because you're not saying it as a forcefully evil thing that this person did. Even though what they did is a crime, we're trying to soften that to them to make them feel like they can tell us the truth about it. And then, of course, we can maintain how long that interview is going to last. And again, we have to stay within the law. If there's certain things that legality could poke its weary head out with, like the person's falling asleep on us, they haven't eaten in hours, those are things we do have to consider, and we want to make sure we stay within the law. But the most of the time, we can control how long those interviews are going to last, as long as that person doesn't say they want to leave. Again, we can stay in that room all day long as they don't want to leave, or if they say they don't, they want to stop talking to us or talk to an attorney, we can spend all day with that person. And so it's up to us a lot of times on how long those interviews are going to last. And we have to set up that moment to determine what length we're going to go with the interview and the individual.